to target this oil refinery facility since the beginning of the war, because they know that there will be retaliation from Israel. And for them, they are now retaliating for yesterday's attack against their gas field in South Faris, yesterday's incident, the Israeli attack. And this is important also for Iran, because we're talking about a big city here. This has its own psychological impact on many hundreds of thousands of people. And definitely Hezbollah is also targeting this area, the bigger Haifa area, Carmel, and the Western Galilee. Again, it's because of the high number of civilians here that can has its own psychological effect, which is what they are after in order to push the Israelis, for them to push the government to stop the war.
All right, Blake Sladine with those updates out of Haifa. We'll be coming to you for more updates throughout this evening on I-24 News. So thank you for that coverage on the ground. I do want to turn our attention to Washington now, because there's still some major questions about the U.S. role in this escalation, especially after President Trump denied approving Israel's strike on Iran's gas infrastructure. Let's bring in our I-24 News senior U.S. correspondent Mike Wagenheim, joined us live from Washington. Mike, what are you hearing from the White House? Is there any clarity on whether the U.S. did have prior knowledge of Israel's energy strikes? Because in Israel, it's believed to be highly unlikely that the U.S. didn't know beforehand.
Highly unlikely. You know, this is kind of similar to the Israeli strike on Hamas targets in, ironically enough, Qatar several months ago, in which eventually Prime Minister Netanyahu in the Oval Office had to call the Prime Minister of Qatar and apologize at the insistence of President Trump. Israeli officials initially insisted that America was looped in, and there was some lack of clarity as to when exactly that looping in actually took place, before the strike, during the strike, afterward. It seems like almost a similar situation here. Israeli officials are still saying the Americans were told about this strike ahead of time on the Iranian gas field. President Trump is insisting, as late as today, I should say, in the White House again, that he didn't know. And sometimes he and Prime Minister Netanyahu will disagree on things, even though there's close coordination. But again, repeated today, it's not going to happen again in terms of a strike on an Iranian gas field, unless Iran strikes at Qatar again. But for Trump's purpose, I didn't know. And he's kind of stuck in the middle here, because Israel's a strong ally. Qatar, unfortunately, a strong ally of the U.S. And if Trump knew and didn't tell the Qataris, well, then he's got a problem with Doha as well, in addition to all the other problems he has right now. Whether Trump knew, we can never really be 100% sure. But his stance right now is, I didn't know. I didn't want it to happen. If I had knew in advance, it wouldn't have happened. Let's make sure it doesn't happen again.
Well, Mike, this is all impacting the energy markets around the world. Some other headlines coming out this evening. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent told Fox News that the U.S. is considering unsanctioning Iranian oil. What exactly would a move like this indicate coming from Washington?
You know, it means that they're out of cards, essentially. Listen, the administration is doing a lot of different things right now to try to keep energy prices in check, including lifting sanctions elsewhere on Russia, which they're taking heat for, on Venezuela as well. There's only so many sanctions you can remove, and so much moving around of reserves that you can do. There was this big announcement, about a week ago, about this consortium of countries that were going to unlock global oil reserves. But when you do the basic math, it doesn't really mean much if the war goes beyond a couple more weeks, which it surely seems at this point like it's going to do. I don't foresee the sanctions on Iranian oil actually being lifted, because that would just massively defeat the purpose of what Trump has been trying to do over his last 6 years combined in office, and would send a very, very convoluted message to the world. But it's a signal right now that the Trump administration really understands the ramifications of the global energy prices rising and the effect it's having back home on domestic soil.
All right, Mike Wagenheim with those updates straight out of Washington for us. Thank you for that coverage. I do want to bring this conversation in studio now. I'm joined by our I-24 News senior Middle East correspondent, Ariel Osrian. We also have our I-24 News senior correspondent Owen Alterman and Ruth Wasserman-Lande, the research fellow at the Miscop Institute for Strategic Affairs, also a former co-chair of the Abraham Accords Parliamentary Caucus. Thank you all for being with us on I-24 News today. A lot of updates for us to discuss. Ruth, I want to begin with you as we're talking about the fallout of what we're seeing the energy markets right now, especially the reaction from the Gulf and Arab states. There was a Wall Street Journal report that Arab governments were furious about Israel's attack and the U.S. failure to head it off. Is this showing any signs of actually impacting American relationships in the region?
The Arab states were furious at Israel. First of all, I think the word Arab states is a very general statement. It depends which Arab state. So if we're talking about Saudi Arabia and Qatar, it's interesting. However, they've been very furious at Israel for the past 2.5 years since October 7th, very, very critical of Israel, and certainly did not stand on the side of Israel when it needed to defend its citizens against its enemies. Second of all, they've been hit as well. So they've started to begin to take a stance which is a little bit less to be on the fence, a little bit less appeasing towards Iran, and a little bit more critical of the entire disappointment, their disappointment towards the brotherly, or rather the lack thereof, behavior of Iran. The United Arab Emirates has been different all along. They've set out to fight against the Muslim Brotherhood and in general extreme Islamism and radicalism on the one hand, and they've seen and understood, despite not wanting instability and war, the threat that is inherent within the Islamic Republic of Iran. And they, as opposed to the other Arab states, have been standing